I didn't go looking for a new life. I went looking for a socket set. Saturday. Late light coming through the high basement windows like thin ribbons of desert dust. Phoenix heat pressing down even underground, the air dense enough to chew. Sarah was gone for the weekend. Yoga retreat in Sedona, a curated silence with matching water bottles and the promise of rebirth for anyone who could afford the package. 13 years married, and this is what our calendars looked like. Her with strangers in a circle, me with spiders and paint cans. The house humming low like it was trying not to wake something. My name is Jacob Harper. 45. I run a small auto shop off Bell Road. 3 lifts, 9 parking spots. One honest man who still believes a torque wrench is a kind of truth. My hands don't stop smelling like oil anymore. Sarah never minded. She called it the scent of bread and roof. And for years I pretended that line was enough to keep us warm. Haley was at a friend's place for a sleepover. Sleepovers at 12 are just trial runs for escape. She'd left her sneakers by the door in that careless V only kids can make. I paused at them the way I always do. That quiet *T of tenderness you don't notice until it's gone. My girl, I thought. My girl with the chipped teal nail polish and the fast humor and the habit of saying I'm fine when she's not. My girl. Or so I still believed. I went downstairs because order calms me. The basement is where we shove the years we don't want to see. Boxes labeled winter, taxes, college maybe, the stiff laughter of inflatable reindeer that only come alive once a year. I pulled on work gloves and started dragging an old shelf off the wall. Metal feet scraped concrete. Dust rose in a slow, holy cloud. Behind the shelf, tucked where no one would casually look, was a box I didn't recognize. Brown cardboard, taped twice, a black scrawl across the top. Personal. Do not open. My first thought was ordinary. Old journals, maybe, or photos she couldn't throw out without feeling like a monster. Sarah's always been sentimental in secret and efficient in public. She keeps school nurse hours and a nurse face, calm for other people's emergencies. At home, she moved through rooms like she was apologizing to the furniture for existing. Lately, she moved around me the same way. I set the box on the concrete and just looked at it. Do not open is not a lock. It's an invitation written in guilt. I told myself I was only checking for leaks, for mold, for anything that could ruin whatever she thought was worth guarding. Then I cut the tape with my key. 2 things inside. A leather-bound journal the color of brewed tea and a photograph in a cheap plastic sleeve. The photo hit first. Sarah, younger by a decade. Hair in a loose wind-tangled fall, holding a man I'd never seen. His face angled toward her neck like he'd found a private joke there. Both of them were laughing with their eyes closed. The kind of joy you can't stage. I flipped the photo over. 3 words in Sarah's handwriting. The clean, rounded letters I knew from grocery lists and notes on the fridge. Forever yours. Travis. The basement changed temperature. Or I did. Same hum from the water heater, same dust, same light, but everything felt like it had shifted a degree to the left. I set the photo down very gently, like it could shatter the house if I let it fall. I lifted the journal. The first page was dated 15 years ago, months before our wedding. The ink bled a little, as if the words were still trying to run. I shouldn't have read it. I know that, but there are kinds of knowing that sit in your bones and beat like a second heart. Curiosity isn't betrayal. Curiosity is the body searching for the pain before the pain finds the body. At first, the entries were ordinary in a way that hurt. Songs on the radio. A joke about a patient who thought a thermometer was a pen. The word Travis sprinkled like cinnamon. Not heavy, not yet, just enough to change the flavor of everything else. He made her laugh. He surprised her with coffee and a sunrise. He knew her before I did. I kept reading because my hands didn't remember how to stop. Then the entries changed. The voice shifted from buoyant to split. She wrote about choices, about timelines, about the right thing versus the true thing. She wrote about a trip to San Francisco with friends, the bachelorette trip I'd heard 100 edited versions of. She mentioned a hotel off Union Square, the smell of rain on cable car tracks, a blue shirt she couldn't bring herself to wash. She didn't name the sin. She didn't have to. Guilt is fluent without nouns. I turned a page and found the hinge my life would swing on. Dated 2 weeks after Haley was born. She's here. She is small and fiery and perfect. I can't stop looking at her mouth. How it curls even when she's asleep. I'm calling her Haley Trey. Trey because some loves don't leave even when you send them away. This is my choice. I will build a good life. I will not say anything. It will pass. It will pass. I read it again, mouth dry, the words blurring like I'd driven through rain without wipers. Trey. We joked for years that Sarah must have picked the middle name because it sounded quick. I thought it was a rhythm thing. I thought it was air and bounce. I didn't think it was a man. I closed the journal. My hands were shaking now, the way they do when you break a bolt and the wrench snaps back, and you realize the thread was never holding. The concrete was cool under me. The house above was quiet in that guilty way houses get when they know you've discovered the truth. I looked again at the photo. His eyes were closed, but I could tell what color they would be. That steel gray some men get away with. I've seen that color in Haley's mornings. I've seen it flash when she runs to tell me a joke she can't contain. I always thought she'd taken it from some untraceable branch of my family. I kept telling myself what every decent man tells himself when a child arrives already glowing. That blood is a stubborn myth, that love is the only heredity that counts. I still want that to be true. I want it with the desperation of a man holding a door against a flood. People talk about betrayal like it's a knife. Sudden, bright, clean. That's a lie. Betrayal is a weight. You don't notice the first ounce. You carry it up the stairs, you carry it through dinner, you carry it across years until the day your knees finally fail, and you say, "Why is the floor so far away?" And someone answers, "Because you've been sinking the whole time." I sat with the box and its small, devastating inventory. Journal, photo, ink, a stranger's name in my wife's hand like a vow made under different weather. I thought about our kitchen mornings. Sarah in her scrubs, hair twisted up, Haley in socks that never matched, me packing lunches like a man rehearsing competence. I thought about the night Sarah came home too tired to talk, the way she slid past me in the hallway like a passenger finding her seat on a crowded bus. I thought about the 1,000 small distances we had stapled together and called marriage. 13 years. 1 child. 1 shop. 1 house where the air knew us better than we knew ourselves. I believed I was the father in this home. I believed my name was the frame around our days. I believed the past had the decency to stay buried once you built a garden on top of it. I put the items back in the box, set the lid on without taping it, and stared at those words again. Do not open. Too late. The seal had never been on the cardboard. It had been on my life. Upstairs, the refrigerator clicked on. A neighbor's mower coughed and caught. Somewhere far off, a siren wrote a thin red line through the afternoon. The world had the nerve to continue. I wiped my hands on my jeans and stood, feeling older than the concrete. I told myself none of this changed the smell of her baby shampoo years ago. The way Haley's fist used to wrap around one of my fingers like she was afraid I'd float away. I told myself names are just letters. I told myself a father is the man who shows up. I told myself a lot of things while the basement looked back at me with perfect honesty. When I finally turned out the light and climbed the stairs, I carried a new silence with me. Not the harmless kind that comes after a long day. The other kind. The kind that moves into the guest room and starts getting mail. On the kitchen table sat a note Sarah had left before she drove north. Back Sunday. Don't forget the sprinklers. A heart at the end. Her hearts had gotten smaller over the years. I hadn't noticed until just then. I stared out the window at the pale lawn, the desert sky cloudless and cruel. Phoenix does this to you. It teaches you that some things burn simply because that's what they're made to do. You can water the ground all you want. The sun will still have its say. In the reflection on the glass, I saw a man who fixes other people's damage for a living. A man who keeps cars on the road long after their owners have stopped caring about them. He tells everyone machines can be forgiven if you give them new parts and a little patience. He has believed that about people too. He has believed it about his wife, about himself, about a house that now held a different name like a secret heartbeat. I touched the window with my knuckles, The way I sometimes tap the hood of a car before I hand back the keys. A superstition. A goodbye. I didn't speak out loud. I didn't curse or promise or plead. I just let the truth settle until it weighed what it was always going to weigh. In the beginning, every family is a story you agree to tell together. In the end, it's the footnote that ruins the page. I had found the footnote. I didn't confront her that night. I didn't call, didn't text, didn't breathe a word of what I'd found. I moved through the weekend like a man pretending gravity was still on his side. The box stayed in the basement, but its echo followed me everywhere. In the sound of the fridge door closing, in the rustle of curtains, in every small noise that proved the house was still alive while I wasn't sure I was. By Sunday afternoon, the desert light was molten and the air inside the house smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and exhaustion. I heard the car before I saw it. Sarah's old Civic rolling into the driveway, the engine whirring in that familiar, forgiving way. She came in smiling, yoga mat slung over one shoulder, hair pulled back, cheeks still flushed from the drive. "Hey, stranger," she said, kissing me on the cheek like nothing had changed. Maybe for her, nothing had. "How was it?" I asked, voice steady in ways it shouldn't have been. "Peaceful," she said. "We did a lot of breath work. You'd have hated it." "Probably," I said, smiling because that's what I'd always done. She talked through dinner, about a woman from Tucson who sold essential oils, about her instructor's cat, about how the stars looked unreal over the canyon. I listened. Every word rolled off her tongue like glass beads. Perfect, polished, meaningless. Haley came home just before sunset, full of chatter about her sleepover. I watched them both move through the kitchen. Mother and daughter, same tilt of the head, same quick laugh, and felt the floor shift under my feet again. When Haley went to her room, I opened the drawer, took out the photograph, and set it on the table between us. Sarah froze mid-sentence. Her smile didn't fall immediately. It cracked slowly, like plaster finding a fault line. "Where did you get that?" she asked. "In the basement," I said. "Behind the shelves, next to your old Christmas boxes." She didn't move. Her eyes traced the photo, then flicked to me, sharp, calculating. "Jacob, that was before you. It doesn't mean anything." "I know when the picture was taken," I said quietly. "I also know what else was in that box." Her eyes narrowed. "You went through my things?" "I found your things," I said, "and they told me more than you ever have." The silence stretched between us, elastic, dangerous. She reached for the photo, but I covered it with my hand. "Who's Travis?" Her mouth opened, then closed. She looked down at her hands like she was reading something written on her palms. "He was someone I knew," she said finally. "A long time ago. We were friends." "Friends don't get called forever yours," I said. My voice was calm, even. Years of fixing cars had taught me that force only makes things break faster. She sighed, that weary, rehearsed exhale she used whenever she wanted to end a conversation. "Jacob, I don't know what you think you found, but it's ancient history. It doesn't matter." I studied her face, the way her eyes didn't quite meet mine. "And Haley's middle name?" I asked. She flinched barely, but I saw it. "What about it?" "Trey," I said. "After Travis, right?" Her silence was louder than a confession. She looked away, rubbing her temples. "That's not what this is about," she said. "You're tired. You've been working too much. You're twisting things." I let her talk, let her stack excuses like a wall between us. Every word she said was a brick. Every breath I took was a hammer hitting something invisible inside me. When she finally stopped, I stood. "I'm not twisting anything," I said. "I'm just done pretending." She blinked, confused. "Pretending what?" "That we're still the same people who stood in front of a minister 13 years ago." "Jacob, don't," I said softly. "Don't try to talk your way out of this. You've had enough practice." Her mouth closed again. The room was still except for the hum of the fridge. It's strange how betrayal always lands in silence, like the world holds its breath out of pity. I didn't shout. I didn't demand. I just left the photo on the table and walked to the basement. The air down there was cooler, calmer, more honest. I sat on the step and thought about the years I'd spent believing in stability, about the way Sarah used to rest her head on my shoulder like she was listening for proof that I existed. I thought about the nights I'd rocked Haley back to sleep while Sarah cried in the shower, saying she was just tired. The box was still there, waiting. I opened the journal again, not to reread, just to confirm I hadn't imagined it. The handwriting was real. The ink was faded, but not old enough to lie. I closed it and made a quiet promise to myself. No more arguments. No more conversations that ended in sighs. I would find the truth the same way I fix everything else. Systematically. The next morning, I told Haley I needed her help for a science project. She laughed, suspicious but curious. For school? She asked. For work, I said. I'm doing a thing on genetics. Want to help me out? She agreed, of course. Kids trust the people who tuck them in. I swabbed her cheek gently, told her it was just for fun. She asked what it would show. How much you take after me, I said. I smiled when I said it. I even meant it. Somewhere deep down, I still hoped the math would be wrong, that the universe would bend toward mercy for once. I mailed the samples the same afternoon. 2 envelopes. One marked, Father, one child. The label said results within 7 business days. I went back to work and tried to lose myself in engines, bolts, grease, the only kind of truth that makes sense when your life doesn't. Metal doesn't lie. It either fits or it doesn't. When the results came, they arrived like any other piece of mail, white envelope, neat font, no warning. I sat in my truck outside the shop, engine off, air thick and unmoving. I tore it open. The first line was enough. Probability of paternity, 0%. I read it twice, then folded it neatly back into the envelope. No screaming, no breaking, no cinematic collapse. Just a stillness that felt surgical. 13 years erased in 1 decimal point. That night, Sarah came home humming. I watched her move through the house, the way she always did, confident in the safety of her routines. She didn't notice the quiet had changed shape. When she went upstairs, I took the journal and the DNA results, slipped them into a manila envelope, and wrote a name across the front. Laura, Sarah's sister. The one she actually listened to. The one she still feared disappointing. I didn't include a note. I didn't need to. The truth speaks fluently when written in ink and science. The next day, the envelope was gone, mailed, anonymous, inevitable. That night, Sarah asked if I was all right. I said I was fine. I meant it in the way you mean fine, when you've stopped bleeding but the wound's still open. She smiled, relieved, and went back to scrolling her phone. I watched her face glow in the screen light and thought about how many years I'd mistaken peace for paralysis. How many times I'd told myself love was endurance. How many times I'd given her the benefit of the doubt when the doubt had already paid in full. When I turned off the light and lay beside her, I could feel the space between us. Not physical, not emotional, but factual. It was the distance between truth and illusion. The kind of distance that can't be crossed once you've measured it. I closed my eyes and thought about Haley, about how she still called me Dad, about how, in the purest sense, she wasn't lying. I was the man who'd raised her, the man who'd loved her without condition. But biology doesn't care about devotion. It just waits for discovery. I'd uncovered the truth. Now it was time for her to face it. Not from my mouth, but from the one voice she couldn't silence. Because sometimes the only way to make a liar tell the truth is to let someone else read it to them. And so I waited for the storm I had already invited into our home. The first call came 2 days later. Sunday morning, sun already high enough to bleach the curtains. I was in the garage changing oil on the Silverado when the house phone rang, one of the few relics left from a life that still pretended permanence. I heard Sarah answer, heard the way her voice faltered halfway through her sister's name. Laura didn't waste time with pleasantries. She must have already read everything, the journal pages, the photo, the test results. From the garage, I couldn't hear the words, but I knew the tone. That sharp mix of shock and disgust people reserve for lies that come from blood. Sarah's voice cracked once, then went quiet. When she hung up, she didn't call my name. She just stood there in the doorway, small against the sun, her face blank with the kind of stillness that comes after the final denial. "Jacob?" she said softly. "Did you send it?" "Yes." "Why her?" "Because she'd believe you before she believed me." She nodded once, as if that was a kind of justice. Then she turned, walked back inside, and shut the door. I heard the lock click. I didn't try to follow. Locks don't mean much after the truth has already gotten in. That afternoon, the silence in the house turned thick, animal, heavy enough to touch. Haley came into the kitchen once, asking if everything was okay. Sarah told her she was tired. I said nothing. For the first time, I didn't know what to call myself in her world anymore. Father was a title built on faith, and mine had just expired. The next morning, Sarah didn't go to work. She sat at the table with her laptop open and her phone buzzing nonstop. First, I thought it was Laura again. But the name that flashed across the screen made my stomach twist. Travis. The call log said missed call. 2 months ago. I scrolled further. The next entries were all from numbers I didn't recognize. Then a final one marked deceased contact archived. My hands froze over the phone. Sarah looked up. "He's dead?" she said quietly, as if reading my thoughts. "Car accident. 2 months ago." I set the phone down. She didn't cry. She just kept staring past me, like there was a horizon only she could see. "He never knew," she said finally. "He didn't even know she existed." I didn't answer. There wasn't a sentence in the English language that fit that moment. Came out later through Laura, through fragments pieced together like crime evidence. Sarah had seen him during her bachelorette trip, San Francisco, Union Square, just like the journal said. Weeks before our wedding. A weekend where she said her friends wanted one last adventure. They got it. When she came home, she was quiet for days. I thought she was just nervous about the wedding. Now I knew better. 6 months into our marriage, she told me she was pregnant. I remember the look on her face when she said it, that watery smile that could have meant anything. I remember thinking it was joy. Maybe it was relief. Maybe guilt looks a lot like love when you squint hard enough. The next few days were chaos disguised as normal. Sarah stayed in the bedroom, curtains drawn, moving like a woman underwater. I went to work, changed oil, tightened bolts, smiled at customers and said I was fine. I didn't tell anyone. Pain this precise needs privacy. By Friday, I'd made up my mind. I called a lawyer. His voice was calm, professional, too polite for the story I told him. When I mentioned the DNA test, he didn't sound surprised. "We see this more than you'd think," he said. "You'll want to file for divorce and a petition to disestablish paternity. Arizona law allows it with genetic proof." "Disestablish," I repeated. The word felt mechanical, like removing a part that no longer fit. He asked for documentation. I gave him everything, the test results, copies of the journal pages, even the photo. Evidence of a life rewritten. Within 48 hours, the paperwork was filed. When Sarah finally found the courage to speak again, it was too late for apologies. She came to me one evening while I was fixing the kitchen faucet. Her voice was low, trembling. "Jacob, please," she said. "We can fix this." I didn't look up. "I fix engines," I said. "Not lies." She took a step closer. "You still love Haley. You can't just erase that." I turned off the water. "You're right," I said. "But I can stop paying for it." Her face hardened, and for the first time I saw something like anger instead of guilt. "You'd punish her for my mistake?" "I'm not punishing anyone," I said. "I'm just done financing a story that isn't mine." That night she called Laura, then her mother, then friends. I could hear her voice rising through the walls. Tears, outrage, self-defense. She tried to turn them against me, but they'd all seen the papers by then. Even her sister had gone quiet on the phone. Truth travels fast when shame gives it wings. By Monday, the first hearing date was set. The lawyer warned me it might get ugly. Didn't. Sarah came to court with trembling hands and no real argument. The judge looked at the evidence, looked at me, and said the words like a surgeon giving a diagnosis. Paternity disestablished. Just like that, I was free legally at least. No financial obligation. No parental rights. No name on the birth certificate. The court clerk slid the final document across the table like a receipt for a debt I never agreed to owe. Outside the courthouse, the sun hit hard. Phoenix light doesn't forgive. It burns away every illusion, even the ones you wish would stay. I sat in my truck for a long time, staring at the steering wheel, feeling the strange weightlessness of a man who's just stepped out of a life that no longer recognizes him. That week, Sarah tried again. Messages from new numbers. We need to talk. Haley misses you. Please don't do this to us. I didn't reply. Every message went into a folder labeled evidence. My lawyer said to keep them just in case. I did, though I never opened them twice. I'd already read her last true sentence the day I found that journal. Then came the calls from mutual friends. Half concern, half gossip. They wanted to know how I could walk away so easily. I told them it wasn't easy. It was necessary. The truth doesn't ask permission. It demands payment. The divorce was finalized within 2 months. The shop stayed mine. The house stayed mine. Everything I'd built before her remained untouched. I didn't ask for damages. Some losses can't be invoiced. Her family drifted from her one by one. Even Laura stopped answering her calls. Betrayal doesn't just break marriages, it rewires bloodlines. Haley stayed with her mother. The law said she wasn't mine, and I wasn't cruel enough to fight biology for custody. Still, some nights, I'd hear echoes of her laughter in the walls, phantom sounds of bedtime stories and scraped knees. I wondered if she'd ever learn the full truth, or if Sarah would find a way to twist even that. Maybe one day she'll look in a mirror and see his eyes, and the world will tilt the way it did for me. People ask what betrayal feels like. I tell them it's not the explosion. It's the quiet after. The moment you realize the war is over and you're still standing, but nothing around you is. That's when you learn what survival really costs. By the time the paperwork arrived confirming the final decree, I wasn't angry anymore. Anger is fuel. It burns out fast. What was left was colder, steadier, a kind of clarity that feels almost like peace. I looked at the signature at the bottom, Jacob Harper, petitioner. The man reclaiming his own name. When I left the courthouse, I didn't look back. You don't mourn a lie. You just bury it where it can't grow again. For months. That's how long it took for silence to start sounding like peace instead of punishment. I remember counting days the way men count debts, a tally of what I no longer owed to anyone. The divorce papers had come, crisp and final. My name stood alone again, clean as a scraped plate. The house was mine. The shop was mine. And the ghosts that used to eat dinner with me had finally stopped pretending they were family. I started with the walls, painted them a color called Dust Horizon. Something neutral, something that didn't remember laughter. I replaced every picture frame, every photo where Sarah's face lived. The hammer left small scars in the drywall where I'd pulled out the nails. A new constellation of freedom. I sold the couch we'd bought during our second year together. The one she'd said was soft enough for movie nights. It had become a monument to pretense. Gone. I kept the tools, the books, the things that stayed quiet when I was hurting. The basement came last. I thought about throwing the box away but decided against it. It wasn't superstition, it was documentation. A reminder of how easy it is to live beside a secret and call it love. I sealed it in plastic, labeled it evidence, and slid it into the farthest corner. That's all the past deserves, preservation without access. By August, the shop was running smoother than ever. Routine became medication. Open at 7, close at 5, count the receipts, breathe. The regulars noticed the change. They said I seemed lighter. I told them I'd cut weight. They didn't need to know which kind. In small towns, honesty just becomes gossip with good posture. Maddie came into my life the way rain does in the desert. Sudden, loud, and impossible to ignore. She owned the body shop 2 blocks over. I'd known her by reputation. Tough, exact, always fair on pricing. When she stopped by one afternoon to borrow a voltage tester, I expected small talk. Instead, She leaned on the counter and asked, "So, you always look this serious? Or is it a weekday thing?" I told her it was both. She laughed. That deep, real laugh that doesn't wait for permission. I hadn't realized how long it had been since I'd heard one like it. Over the next few weeks, she started stopping by more. Sometimes for tools, sometimes just to talk about nothing. She never asked about Sarah. She never asked about the past. That silence between us wasn't ignorance. It was respect. The first time we had dinner, she paid half without blinking. I didn't argue. Quality felt new, almost strange. When she dropped me off, she didn't lean in for a kiss. She just said, "You don't look like a man who needs saving." That's good. Then she drove off. I stood on the curb longer than I should have, letting the taillights fade like a quiet applause. For the first time in 13 years, I slept through the night. No dreams. No voices. Just the low hum of the air conditioner and the sound of a house finally learning to breathe on its own. Sarah still tried to reach me. New numbers, blocked IDs, even a handwritten letter once. The envelope smelled faintly of lavender, the same scent she used to wear. I didn't open it. Whatever apology she'd written came too late to matter. Each message went into a folder on my phone titled Archive. My lawyer said to keep documenting just in case. So I did. I treated her desperation like evidence. One message came from an unfamiliar number claiming to be Haley. "Hi, Dad." It began. 2 words that felt like a knife wrapped in ribbon. The rest of the text was longer, something about missing me, about how she didn't care about DNA, about how she still saw me as her father. But the language was wrong. Too formal, too adult. Sarah's voice hiding behind her daughter's name. I didn't reply, because if it was Haley, the truth would only hurt her. And if it was Sarah, she'd already used the word dad as a wee *p*n once. I wasn't giving her another chance to aim. Sometimes, I'd drive past the old elementary school where I used to pick Haley up. I'd see the kids running, backpacks bouncing, their laughter sharp in the heat. I'd wonder which version of her I'd been raising, mine or his. The question didn't have an answer, but I stopped needing one. Biology decides blood. Love decides who sleeps at night. By September, the yard was different too. I ripped out the rosebushes Sarah had planted and replaced them with desert succulents. Resilient things that survive by keeping their own water. The metaphor wasn't lost on me. Maddie helped sometimes, her hands dirty, her hair tied back with a bandana. "You're not big on nostalgia, are you?" she asked once, wiping sweat from her forehead. "No," I said. "Nostalgia's just guilt wearing perfume." She smiled. "Then you're cured." Maybe I was. Or maybe healing just means learning to stop asking for apologies you'll never get. We didn't rush anything. There were dinners, movie nights, mornings spent sharing black coffee in silence. She never filled the quiet. She just respected it. That's how I knew she understood. You can't build something new if you keep leaving the door open for what burned you. By winter, I'd stopped checking my phone for unknown numbers. I'd stopped expecting closure. The last text from Sarah came on a Sunday night in December. "Please, she needs you. I can't do this alone." I read it once, then deleted it. Because I wasn't her husband, and I wasn't Haley's father. I was the man who paid the bill for someone else's choices. That debt was cleared. Some nights I still thought about Haley, not as a ghost or a loss, but as a chapter that ended before it became a lie. I hoped she'd grow up kind. I hoped she'd never know the truth, or if she did, that it wouldn't poison her. She deserved a childhood unburdened by adult sins. I didn't lose a daughter. I lost a role written by someone who never told me I was only an understudy. Now, when I look around my house, I see clean lines, open space, light that doesn't feel borrowed. Freedom doesn't announce itself. It arrives quietly, sits down at your table, and asks for nothing. Sometimes I wonder if Sarah ever looks at the empty side of the bed and realizes what silence costs. Or if she still blames me for choosing truth over illusion. But that's the difference between us. She thinks love survives lies. I think love dies the moment you have to hide proof of it in a box. I keep that box in the basement under a tarp behind new shelves. I never open it, but I also never forget it's there. It's not a wound anymore. It's a landmark. The place where I stopped mistaking endurance for devotion. When people ask if I regret walking away, I tell them this: you can't betray a man who's already learned to stop needing you. I don't carry anger, just memory. I don't carry guilt, just evidence. And when I lock the shop at night, smell the gasoline and steel, and see Maddie waiting by her truck, I realize something simple and cruel and freeing. The truth didn't ruin my life. It returned it. The man who stayed isn't always the hero. Sometimes he's just the one too afraid to leave. But the man who leaves, he's the one who finally understands the price of staying. And I paid mine in full.